The scent of lilies was suffocating. It clung to the air, thick and sweet, a funeral shroud draped over what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I stood at the altar, my hand resting limply in Leo Vance's, the weight of my custom-designed diamond ring feeling like a lead shackle. The cathedral was a blur of smiling, expectant faces, but all I could focus on was the frantic beat of my own heart, a wild bird trapped in a gilded cage. I had been reborn into this moment, this exact second of exquisite torture. The haze of my previous death, the screech of metal, the shattering glass, the cold, crushing finality, had lifted just as the efficient voice of the priest echoed in the vast space. Leo Vance, do you take Maya Sterling to be your lawfully wedded wife? I felt Leo's hand twitch in mine. Not a nervous tremor but a jolt of purpose. I turned my head slowly, my vision clearing. I saw his profile, the sharp jawline, the intense focus in his eyes that was not directed at me, but at some distant, urgent point beyond the stained glass windows. He wasn't just my childhood sweetheart, my fiancé. He was a man on a mission, a man who had also lived this life before. In that moment I knew. He remembered everything. And his one all-consuming regret was not my death, not the ruin of my family, but her. He released my hand. The sound was not loud, but it echoed like a gunshot in the stunned silence of the cathedral. He didn't look at me, didn't offer an apology or a backward glance. He simply turned and ran. He ran down the polished aisle, a groom in a bespoke tuxedo fleeing his own wedding, a modern-day fairy tale gone horribly wrong. Gasps rippled through the crowd, swelling into a wave of shocked murmurs. His mother, Eleanor, shot to her feet, her face a mask of outrage. Leo, what do you think you're doing? But I knew. He was going to find his white moonlight, his unattainable dream, Isabella Reed. The quiet, ethereal girl from high school he had pined for in our last life. On this very day in the previous timeline, Isabella had boarded a plane to study abroad, a decision Leo had always blamed me for influencing. The memories of our last life crashed over me. The long, silent standoffs because of her. His pleading voice, Maya, Isabella's family is falling apart. She's all alone. It's not easy for a girl like her. Don't you feel any sympathy? Is your kindness just for show? And beside him Isabella would stand, a fragile flower, her eyes perpetually glassy with unshed tears, so weak, so pitiful, it was impossible to argue without looking like a monster. He always had an excuse. I only see her as a sister. My heart belongs to you. But his eyes, the way they lingered on her with a tender, aching affection, told a different story. I knew Leo. We had grown up together, our families intertwined. The Vances and the Sterlings, a powerhouse alliance forged in boardrooms and backyard barbecues. I remembered a time before Isabella when Leo was my Leo. He'd glare down any boy who tried to slip me a love letter, his possessiveness a strange, comforting constant. Maya, he'd say, none of those idiots are good enough for you. My mom already sees you as the one. I'd pretend not to understand, my heart fluttering. Sees me as what? He'd just smile, a secret, knowing look, and I'd chalk it up to teenage shyness, believing his feelings mirrored my own. Then in our second year of high school Isabella Fields transferred in. And my Leo vanished. No more walks home together. No more flirty, ambiguous comments. No more roadside flowers or my favorite roasted chestnuts. When I'd tease him about our family ties, he'd look at me with growing irritation until one day he finally snapped, "Can you stop sticking to me like some clingy leech? You're so annoying." I gave up. I kept my distance. I chose a college on the opposite side of the country. It was in our junior year that he slowly seeped back into my life. Checking in, making me laugh, flying across the nation to visit me. My roommates swooned. Childhood sweethearts are the best, they'd sigh. Hope, that treacherous weed, began to grow again in my heart. Why did you come back? I finally asked him one day. I thought you hated me. He looked dead serious. Maya, be my girlfriend. I've liked you all along. What about Isabella? I'd whispered, the name a ghost between us. He waved a dismissive hand. I was a kid. I looked her way a few times. Why are you still hung up on that? My mom always saw you as her future daughter-in-law. What I didn't know then, but learned too late, was that he only came crawling back because Isabella had started dating someone else. He had lost his chance with her, so he settled for me. After graduation the wedding plans began. In front of my parents, Leo swore he would love me with all his heart. I believed him. I loved him and I looked forward to our future with every fiber of my being. Until Isabella showed up again. This time I was furious. I wasn't a naive schoolgirl anymore. The wedding date was set. I brought in both sets of parents. My father's financial backing was the bedrock of the Vance empire. There was no way they would let Leo jeopardize that. His father issued an ultimatum: cancel the wedding and be disowned. Isabella left in tears, declaring she would go abroad. Leo, heartbroken, gave me the silent treatment for days. I was the one who had to back down to comfort him. Our parents mediated and he finally started speaking to me again. 6 months later we heard the news. Isabella had been killed in a random street mugging overseas. Leo drowned his sorrows in alcohol, landing himself in the hospital. When he woke up he never mentioned her again. Instead he became the perfect husband. Attentive, loyal, doting. He cooked, he shopped with me, he came home straight after work. To the outside world I had it all. My father, seeing his apparent sincerity, began to trust him, giving him more responsibility and deepening our business ties. I thought I would spend a lifetime in bliss. Then the bottom fell out. My father was arrested for economic crimes. In a panic my mother tried to bribe an official. And I discovered the horrifying truth. Leo had never forgotten Isabella's death. He carried the wound in his heart and he blamed my family for it. He had been plotting our downfall all along. While I was desperately trying to clear my father's name, driving on a rain-slicked mountain road, Leo called me. His voice was cold, devoid of any emotion I had ever loved. Maya, if you can get this evidence and bring it back within the hour, you can save your dad. I pushed the car faster, my heart in my throat. I didn't expect the brakes to fail. As I fishtailed, panic seizing me, I called him again. His voice was the last thing I heard. Maya, Isabella died because of your family. It's time to repay that blood debt. Don't worry, I'll make sure your parents are well taken care of in prison. The crash was a symphony of tearing metal and my own shattered life. And now I was back. Standing at the altar, the discarded bride. The murmurs of the guests brought me back to the present. Leo's father, Robert Vance, roared, "If you dare walk out now, I'll disown you." Eleanor's voice trembled. "Leo, whatever it is, can't it wait until after the ceremony?" Leo seemed to come back to himself. He turned, his gaze sweeping over the scandalized crowd before landing on me. A familiar, condescending smile touched his lips. "Maya, you've always been so good and obedient. Don't make a scene. I'll be back as soon as I'm done." The words were a punch to the gut, a perfect echo of a past life where I had swallowed my pride and played the part of the understanding wife. That meek woman was dead. In her place was someone forged in fire and betrayal. Hatred, cold and sharp, crystallized within me. I wanted to strike him down where he stood. I tossed my bouquet of lilies aside. It hit the ground with a soft, final thud. "Leo," I said, my voice cold and clear, cutting through the whispers. "Are you breaking off this marriage in front of everyone?" He frowned, irritated by my defiance. "Maya, I have something to do. Don't be unreasonable. Be good." My parents stepped forward, their faces like stone. "What could possibly be so urgent?" my father, Alexander Sterling, demanded. "That it can't wait until after you've said your vows?" The guests were leaning in, hungry for the drama. I saw my opening. If he cared so much about his precious Isabella, I would help him show the world just how devoted he was. I stepped forward, forcing a pitiful look onto my face, clinging to my mother's arm. "Let him go," I said, my voice softening into a gentle, wounded tone. "Maybe it really is something important. We can talk after he's taken care of it." My parents looked at me, shocked and disappointed. The guests whispered, "What is Leo thinking?" Leo shot me a look of pure displeasure. "At least you know what's good for you," he said coldly. And with that he turned and ran finally and completely out of my life. As the heavy cathedral doors swung shut behind him, I lowered my head, pretending to cry. But my tears were not of sorrow. They were tears of rage and of a plan beginning to form. I leaned into my father. "Daddy," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Send someone to follow him. Now." The game had begun. And this time I held all the cards. The silence Leo left in his wake was louder than any organ fanfare. I kept my head bowed, my shoulders shaking with feigned sobs, but my mind was racing, clear and cold as ice. My father, Alexander Sterling, stiffened beside me, his arm a solid pillar of support. He leaned down, his voice a low, concerned murmur meant only for me. Maya, sweetheart, it's going to be. Daddy, I interrupted, my whisper sharp and urgent against his tuxedo lapel. Send someone. No. I need to know where he's going and what he's doing. He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine. He saw no heartbreak there, only a fierce, determined fire. After a beat, a flicker of understanding passed between us. He gave a barely perceptible nod and subtly signaled to one of his most trusted aides, who melted away from the crowd. On the dais, Leo's parents, Robert and Eleanor Vance, were scrambling to contain the disaster. Their faces were pale, their smiles strained as they apologized to the guests, trying to brush the entire humiliating spectacle under the rug. They were already acting as if my feelings, my very presence, were an inconvenient afterthought. They didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't ask what I wanted to do. They were trying to salvage their family's dignity, and I was just a prop in their narrative. That wouldn't do. I lifted my head, wiping at my dry eyes with the back of my hand. I walked to the center of the altar, my steps steady on the polished marble. I picked up the microphone the priest had abandoned. Everyone, I said, my voice echoing through the cathedral, surprisingly steady. The murmuring ceased instantly. All eyes were on me, the jilted bride. You've all come from far away to share this day with us. You shouldn't leave disappointed. I could see the confusion on their faces. Robert Vance was making a subtle, cut-it-out gesture from the sidelines. I ignored him. The banquet is paid for, I continued, forcing a small, brave smile. There's a mountain of food that hasn't been served. Please, let's all go to the reception hall. Enjoy yourselves. Eat well, drink well. To make up for the unexpected entertainment, I'll be adding several more premium dishes and vintage wines to the menu. A ripple of interest went through the crowd. Scandal was juicy, but free lobster and fine champagne were tangible. We'll have music, games, and a grand prize drawing, I announced, handing the microphone to the bewildered MC, whom I instructed to keep the atmosphere lively. My one goal was to keep every single guest from leaving. I wanted them all there, fed and happy for the main event. The crowd, mollified by the promise of a continued party, began to file out towards the reception. My parents stayed by my side, their worry a tangible force. Maya, what are you doing? My mother, Clara, asked, her voice tight with anxiety. Setting the stage, Mom, I replied, my gaze fixed on the door. Just wait. We moved to the opulent ballroom of the Vance's hotel. I moved through the crowd, playing the part of the gracious, wronged hostess, ensuring the wine flowed freely and the most expensive delicacies were circulated relentlessly. The Vance family was paying for this spectacle, and I had no intention of saving them a single penny. About 40 minutes later, my father's phone vibrated. He glanced at it and his face turned a dangerous shade of purple. The veins in his temple throbbed. He looked as if he were about to explode. I calmly took the phone from his hand, reading the update and the attached photos. A cold, grim satisfaction settled in my chest. It was even better than I'd hoped. Stay calm, Daddy, I murmured, placing a soothing hand on his arm. Watch. I walked over to where Robert and Eleanor Vance were huddled, trying to put on a brave face for their business associates. I allowed my lower lip to tremble, letting tears I didn't feel well up in my eyes. Uncle Robert, Aunt Eleanor, I began, my voice choking with expertly feigned emotion. You saw how Leo treated me. He's the one who ran out, and he had the nerve to call me unreasonable. I drew a shaky breath. I was raised as my parents' beloved daughter. I've never wronged him. Hasn't he gone too far? Eleanor had the decency to look ashamed. Robert cleared his throat. Maya, I'm sure the boy has a good explanation. I'm not so desperate that I have to marry a man who despises me, I declared, my voice rising as I turned and snatched a microphone from a passing waiter. The music faltered. Every head swiveled in our direction. I think we're all curious, I announced to the entire ballroom, to know what was so earth-shatteringly important that Leo felt he had to abandon his own wedding. What emergency could possibly justify this? A wave of eager anticipation filled the room. This was the gossip of the century. Let me show you, I said, my voice dripping with false pain. With a few taps on my phone, I cast the live feed onto the giant screens flanking the dance floor. The images were crystal clear, courtesy of my father's very competent man. There, in a secluded garden courtyard not 10 minutes away, were Leo and Isabella. They weren't talking. They were wrapped in a desperate, passionate embrace, their bodies fused together, kissing as if the world were ending. A collective sharp gasp echoed through the ballroom. Then utter silence, broken only by the sound of Robert Vance's glass shattering on the floor. I took out my phone and dialed Leo's number. It rang several times before he picked up, his voice breathless and thick with irritation. "Maya, what the hell do you want now?" "Leo," I asked, my tone deceptively calm. "Are you with Isabella right now?" "You're being ridiculous again," he snapped, the lie coming so easily. "I told you I had something to take care of. That's it." He hung up. The disconnect was the final nail in his coffin. I wiped at my dry eyes and looked toward his parents, my expression one of utter devastation. "So Leo was lying to me," I said, my voice small but carrying through the silent hall. "Whose daughter isn't a treasure to her parents? How could I ever tolerate being treated like this?" I let a single real tear of fury escape. "Since he's been unfaithful in his heart and now in his actions, I'll do him a favor. The engagement is off. From now on, there is nothing tying the Sterling family to the Vance family." I didn't wait for their pleas or their excuses. I didn't look back. I walked to my parents, took their hands and led them out of the ballroom, leaving a storm of whispers and a ruined reputation in our wake. In the car, the silence was heavy. My parents kept looking at me, their faces a mixture of heartbreak and rage. "That bastard," my father finally growled. "I'll ruin him." "He's trash, Maya," my mother said, clutching my hand. "You deserve so much better." I looked at them, these two pillars of my life who had been brought so low in another time. The gratitude that washed over me was so profound it stole my breath. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for being here." I knew what I had to do next. It was a risk, a monumental one, but I had to take it. I took a deep breath. "Mom, Dad," I began, my voice trembling, but this time with genuine emotion. "There's something I need to tell you. It's going to sound insane, but you have to believe me." And I told them everything. The previous life. The marriage. Isabella's death. Leo cold, calculated revenge. My father's arrest. My mother's desperate mistake. The car crash. The brakes failing. Leo's final chilling words. I braced myself for them to think I had lost my mind, that the trauma of being left at the altar had broken me. They simply exchanged a long, shocked look. Then my father reached over and pulled me into a fierce, crushing hug. My mother joined, her tears wet against my cheek. "Hi, baby," my father said, his voice rough with emotion. "You've suffered enough. I won't let that bastard get away with any of it." You believe me?" I stammered, incredulous. My mother cupped my face. "If we don't believe our own daughter, then who can we believe? You've been honest and sensible since you were little. You never lie." In that moment, surrounded by their unconditional love and belief, the last of my fear melted away. The hunted was now the hunter. Leo wanted his precious white moonlight? Fine. He could have her. Let's see how brightly she would shine when he lost everything that had propped him up in his first successful life. Let's see if his perfect love could survive the harsh light of poverty and struggle. The first move was mine. And I had just declared checkmate on his entire future. The 2 days following the wedding that wasn't were a flurry of quiet, determined activity. The public scandal was a raging inferno, fanned by the guests' vivid accounts and the incriminating photos that had mysteriously leaked to the press. The headlines were brutal. Vance heir jilts Sterling heiress for mystery lover, garden of earthly delights, runaway groom's secret rendezvous. I ignored it all. The humiliation was a weapon I had willingly wielded. Feeling it now would be counterproductive. Instead, I sat with my father in his oak-paneled study, the scent of old books and fine whiskey a comforting constant. Spread before us were financial reports, business projections and partnership agreements. "There's no need to worry about the Vance's so-called friendship anymore," my father stated, his voice all business. He pointed to a proposed merger with a tech firm we had been hesitant on due to the Vance's competing interests. "Our business should have expanded into this sector a long time ago. We've been held back by sentimental alliances." It was a relief to hear him say it. We were dismantling, brick by brick, the infrastructure that had supported Leo's rise in our previous life. It felt like draining the swamp before the alligator could even hatch. A soft knock interrupted us. Our housekeeper, Auntie Lena, a woman who had been with our family since before I was born, entered. Her kind face was pinched with distaste. "Miss Maya," she said, her tone laced with disapproval. "Someone from the Vance family is here." She rolled her eyes, a gesture so uncharacteristically bold it spoke volumes. "It's the young master. He's brought a giant diamond ring saying he wants to propose to you again." She looked at me, her expression pleading. "He's afraid you'll soften and say yes. Miss, please don't fall for it again. If he dared to ditch you once, he'll dare to do it a second time." She leaned in, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "And he even brought that shameless mistress along with him. What kind of proposal is this? It's straight up bullying." My father's face darkened, his hands clenching into fists on the desk. "I'll have security remove him." "No, Dad," I said, standing up smoothly. A cold smile touched my lips. "It's fine. I'll handle it. Now isn't the time for you to get involved. He needs to hear it from me." Things were different now. I wasn't the same fool he could deceive with a few sweet words and a flash of a diamond. I was wide awake. I walked out of the study and through the grand foyer of our home. As I approached the main door, I saw them through the side lights. Leo standing on our manicured driveway, looking for all the world like a contrite romantic hero. He wore a perfectly tailored slate gray suit, his hair artfully tousled. In one hand he held a massive bouquet of red roses. In the other, a velvet ring box was open, revealing a diamond that was indeed obscenely large. It was a performance, and he was the leading man. And just a few steps behind him, hovering like a pale, delicate shadow, was Isabella. She was dressed in a simple white sundress, her hands clasped demurely in front of her, the picture of fragile innocence. For a second it was déjà vu. The handsome, persistent suitor, the pitiful, misunderstood other woman. It was a scene from my past life, a dynamic I had tolerated for far too long. I pushed the heavy door open. The sunlight was bright, and Leo's face immediately lit up with a practiced, tender smile. It was the same smile he'd used to placate me 1,000 times before. "Maya, sweetheart," he began, his voice a low, soothing caress. He walked towards me, extending the roses. "Don't be mad anymore." The audacity was breathtaking. He held out the ring, his expression one of gentle reproach. "Maya, you're being so difficult. Didn't I tell you to wait for me to come back? Why did you have to blow things out of proportion?" He sighed as if dealing with a temperamental child. "I know you were mad I left you, but it's over now. And I already explained. Isabella's family had some issues. He was feeling down. I was just comforting her." The moment the words left his mouth, Auntie Lena, who had been watching from the doorway, exploded. "Comforting someone?" she shrieked, marching forward and planting her hands on her hips. "Since when does comfort mean making out? Or did you comfort her all the way to bed too?" Leo's face darkened, a flash of genuine anger in his eyes. But because I was standing there, he held his tongue, his jaw tightening. His disgusting excuses only made me sneer internally. He truly thought I was still that gullible girl, that my love for him was a switch he could flip on and off at will. I turned my face away from him, not even deigning to look at the ring. "I'm not mad, Leo. I'm actually grateful you ran away. It helped me see the real you." I met his gaze, my own cold and flat. "But if you already ran once, why come back now? Can't let go of the benefits that come from my family? What do you call this?" Auntie Lena jumped in, mocking him. "He probably just can't live without all that money." Leo clenched his fists, the velvet of the ring box crumpling in his grip. "Maya, do you have to be this harsh?" It was then that Isabella stepped forward. She moved with a delicate grace, frowning as she looked at me, her eyes instantly welling with tears. She was a master of her craft. "Maya, I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's all my fault. I never meant to ruin your wedding." She sniffled, a delicate, pitiful sound. "Leo really cares about you. Even after getting yelled at and hit by your parents, he never once blamed you. He still wants to marry you." She cried so delicately, a weepy damsel in distress straight out of a bad movie. That day I was just overwhelmed by my family's problems. I lost control for a moment, that's all. Auntie Lena's face was a thundercloud. "You shameless home wrecker," she spat. "How dare you speak to our miss like that? Only a filthy person like you would want a sleaze bag like him. A perfect match. Two disgusting people just made for each other. Leo couldn't stand it. Seeing his white moonlight insulted by the help was too much for his pride. His composure shattered. He lunged forward, his foot coming off the ground as if to charge at Auntie Lena. I moved faster, stepping squarely between them. Whatever Auntie Lena says, I declared, my voice ringing with authority, I agree with. Was any of it wrong? Emboldened, Auntie Lena grabbed a broom that was leaning against the porch rail. Let me beat these filthy lovebirds out of here, she yelled, brandishing it like a spear. Seeing the broom coming, Leo's instincts took over. He didn't protect himself. He turned and pulled Isabella into his arms, shielding her with his own body. The broom connected with a solid thwack against his shoulder. His fury exploded. He spun around, his eyes blazing as he looked at me, all pretense of tenderness gone. Maya, don't push it, he snarled. One day when you come crawling back to beg me, I won't forgive you. I laughed, a cold, sharp sound that held no humor. You're trash, Leo. If you've got mental problems, go get them treated. He stared at me, his chest heaving, the perfect proposal lie in ruins at his feet. He grabbed Isabella's hand, his grip undoubtedly too tight, and stalked back to his car without another word, leaving the roses and the ridiculous ring discarded on our driveway. I watched them go, the cold knot in my chest tightening. This was only the beginning. He still thought he could win. He was so sure of himself, so convinced of his own charm and my undying devotion. He had no idea that the woman he was dealing with now was not his childhood sweetheart, but a ghost he himself had created. A ghost who had come back for vengeance, and who would not rest until his world was as ash around him. In the weeks that followed, Leo's parents came by our house several times, their faces etched with a mixture of shame and desperation. My parents, now fully aware of the monstrous truth, refused to see them. The Sterling-Vance alliance was officially and publicly dead. I knew Leo hadn't given up. His arrogance was a bottomless well. He still believed I was hopelessly in love with him, that my anger was just a temporary storm he could weather. He was so sure of himself, so convinced he knew me. After all, I had followed him around since we were children, easy to please and even easier to manipulate. He assumed that no matter how outrageously he behaved, he could always come back, lower his head a little, sweet-talk me, and I'd melt just like before. That was his fatal flaw. He was fighting the ghost of the old Maya, while the new one was systematically dismantling his future. I had someone following him. The reports were as nauseating as they were predictable. He and Isabella were spending every night together, playing house in a luxury apartment his parents were still funding. My parents were livid. They'd watched him grow up, and even they had misjudged the depth of his duplicity. When Mr. and Mrs. Vance showed up at our house for what would be the final time, my parents didn't mince words. My father threw a stack of the surveillance photos onto the marble table in our foyer. The images were clear. Leo and Isabella hand-in-hand shopping, kissing in cafes, entering his apartment building together late at night. After that, the Vances didn't dare come plead on Leo's behalf again. The engagement was officially, irrevocably over. But the Vances were in urgent need of funding. With the Sterling pipeline severed, they had no choice but to look elsewhere. I knew exactly where Leo would turn. In our previous life, one of his first major coups had been a partnership with the Rinshu Corporation, a rising tech giant from Yi-City. I was certain that in this life, desperate and scrambling, he'd do whatever it took to get on board that ship. I discovered that Rinshu was hosting a new product launch event, which was in reality a high-stakes business cocktail party. It was the perfect hunting ground for a man like Leo. And it was the perfect place for me to lay a trap. I arrived at the event looking nothing like a jilted, heartbroken woman. I wore a dress of deep emerald green, a color that spoke of confidence and power, not vulnerability. My hair was sleek, my makeup flawless. I looked like I belonged. And no surprise, I saw him there. Leo in his element, working the room with a charming smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. And clinging to his arm, a vision in pale pink, was the ever-fragile Isabella. They were making their way toward a group of young, influential-looking men in the corner. My target was among them. Rinshu Yu, the sole heir to the Rinshu Corporation. We had attended the same university, though we moved in different circles. We weren't close, but we were familiar. And compared to a total stranger like Leo, I was far more trustworthy. I moved quickly, a graceful green-clad shark gliding through the crowd. I reached the group just as Leo was beginning his pitch. And we believe the Vance Group's infrastructure can seamlessly integrate with your new platform, Leo was saying, his voice full of polished confidence. I squeezed myself smoothly between Rinshu and Leo, linking my arm through Rinshu's with a familiarity I didn't truly possess. Rinshu. What a surprise seeing you here. I said, my voice bright and cheerful. Of course I'd known he would be here. His mother's family was a major investor. Leo looked stunned, his sentence trailing off. You two know each other? He asked, his smile strained. I tilted my head and pretended to just notice him. Oh, isn't this my cheating ex-fiancé? I said, my tone casual as if commenting on the weather. I glanced at Isabella. Here with his mistress. I paused, tapping my chin. Wait, actually, I guess I can't call her that anymore. He never succeeded in marrying me after all. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Rinshu's expression shift. The polite interest he'd been showing Leo evaporated, replaced by a cool, assessing look. Reputation was everything in these circles, and I had just publicly branded Leo as untrustworthy and dishonorable. Leo's jaw tightened. I could see the muscles working. He was clearly furious, but he was trapped in a room full of potential investors. Maya, he said through gritted teeth, trying to regain control. This is a business event. Can we keep our personal matters private? Oh, but this is business, Leo, I replied sweetly. You see, this guy has been chasing me around during the day, begging me to marry him again. And at night, I said, looking pointedly at Isabella. He's sleeping with someone else. If you're going to work with him, Rinshu, you should be careful. His loyalties seemed to be flexible. That was the killing blow. Rinshu's face closed off completely. He gave Leo a curt, dismissive nod. I see. Thank you for the information, Maya. He then turned to the other young men in his group. Gentlemen, shall we? And just like that he walked away, taking Leo's most promising business opportunity with him. Leo's fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. If we hadn't been in public, I honestly wondered if he would have hit me. Emma, Maya, he growled, catching himself. He was so angry he was slipping. You're really going to go against me like this? Already told you. I only see Isabella as a sister. Why won't you believe me? His voice took on a wounded tone. You've really disappointed me. After everything I've done to win you back, it's still not enough. You're too willful. No one but me would put up with that. The sheer, unadulterated audacity was almost impressive. He was trying to gaslight me in the middle of a cocktail party. Seeing that his anger wasn't working, he switched tactics again. His shoulders slumped, and he looked at me with those deep, soulful eyes that had once made my heart flutter. Now they just made my skin crawl. Maya, he said, his voice softening to a whisper. What will it take for you to forgive me? I admit I was wrong to leave you that day, but it was a life-or-death situation. I had no choice. He took a step closer. We grew up together. Don't you know how I feel about you? His voice was a low, intimate caress. He was doing it on purpose, trying to use the crowd, putting on a public performance to pressure me into reconciling. A few people nearby were beginning to glance over, curious. But I wasn't the same fool. I looked back at him with an equally sorrowful expression. Is this your idea of love, Leo? Betraying me over and over again. I raised my voice just enough for the onlookers to hear. When she didn't want you, you came crawling back to me. Do you think I'm your trash bin? I let my gaze flicker to Isabella, who was trying to look invisible. You say she's like a sister to you, but who cuddles their own sister like that? Hooking up in a hotel every night? Don't think I don't know. You two have already slept together. A soft gasp came from a woman standing nearby. I pressed my advantage, my voice dripping with scorn. A life-or-death emergency, please. You just couldn't wait to drag her off to make a baby. If you have the guts to do it, then own up to it. You slept with someone else. You betrayed me. And you still have the nerve to ask my family to do business with yours to help you out? There's a limit to shamelessness. With that, I turned to walk away, the picture of wounded dignity. But Leo grabbed my arm, his grip firm. His face was a mask of sorrow. Maya, I really love you. What will it take for you to forgive me? I really do love you, God. He was laughable. His shamelessness knew no bounds. I looked around, my eyes landing on a towering champagne fountain, its cascading liquid catching the light. I pointed to it. Drink it all. I said flatly. Every drop. Not a single spill. If it doesn't kill you from alcohol poisoning, it'll at least make you explode. Leo froze, stunned that I'd suggest something so harsh, so publicly cruel. Isabella, ever the martyr, stepped forward, her voice a pitiful waver. If that's what it takes to calm Miss Sterling down, then I'll do it. She reached for a champagne flute. Of course, Leo couldn't bear to see her humiliated. He shot me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred and dragged her away, his tail firmly between his legs. I watched them go, a small, cold smile playing on my lips. Well, since they were already here, I hadn't wasted the opportunity. But my work for the night wasn't done. I still had to find Renshu. A new alliance was waiting to be forged, and this time I would be the one holding the pen. The months that followed were a satisfying blur of strategic moves and quiet observation. With the Renshu deal dead in the water, Leo was left scrambling for funding, a desperate man trying to plug a dozen leaks in a sinking ship. His constant, smothering attempts to win me back dwindled to nothing, for which I was profoundly grateful. He simply didn't have the time. His precious white moonlight, Isabella, however, became a source of perverse entertainment. In the beginning, she'd shown up at our gate a few times, playing the heartbroken penitent, crying about how hard things were for Leo and how could I be so heartless. But once Leo, through some Herculean effort and what I suspected were ruinous loan terms, managed to secure a temporary line of credit, her tune changed dramatically. Her sob stories morphed into shameless bragging. She'd coincidentally run into my friends, detailing the new handbag Leo had bought her, the huge diamond bracelet she'd received just yesterday. If I hadn't known the truth about their precarious finances, I might have thought she was funding it all with her own body. I'd started having occasional lunches with Renshu. Our relationship was strictly platonic, built on a foundation of mutual business interest, and I suspected his fascination with the drama that seemed to follow me. He was sharp, cynical, and had a dry sense of humor that I appreciated. I told him about Isabella's latest boasts over coffee one afternoon. He listened, sipping his espresso, a faint smile on his lips. If you didn't know better, I mused, you'd think she was being paid for services rendered. Renshu laughed, a short, genuine sound. Isn't that basically just selling yourself? He said, setting his cup down. Even if it's to one person, it's still selling. I gave him a big thumbs up. You're absolutely right. 6 months passed. Thanks to my rebirth and the insider knowledge it afforded, my family had already formalized a powerhouse partnership with Renshu Corporation. What others saw as emerging trends, I knew as established fact from my past life. To me, the future was just memory. It was an unfair advantage, and I wielded it without a shred of guilt. Leo, I knew, was aware of our success. It must have been a special kind of hell for him, watching the future he felt entitled to unfold in my hands instead of his. The declining assets and mounting liabilities of the Vance Group left him overextended and exhausted. He was working twice as hard as in our previous life, desperately juggling everything just to keep his family's company from imploding. The strain was starting to show in the paparazzi photos. He looked thinner, harder, the easy charm replaced by a permanent tension. On Qixi, the Chinese Valentine's Day, I decided to set the final stage. I dressed with careful intention, an outfit that was both alluring and vulnerable. I went to a trendy, loud bar in a part of the city I wouldn't normally frequent. The music was throbbing, the crowd dense. I ordered a drink, barely touched it, and made a show of looking slightly lost and overwhelmed. It didn't take long. I started to feel a familiar, artificial dizziness, a heavy lethargy that couldn't have come from a single sip of champagne. The drink had been tampered with, just as I'd hoped. Clutching my small bag, I stumbled out of the bar and into the cool night air, making sure my exit was noticeable. I turned down a narrow, poorly lit alley, a shortcut to where my car was supposedly parked. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw 2 men detach themselves from the shadows and follow me. Perfect. I quickened my pace, feigning panic, and turned another corner, deliberately leading us into a dead end. I turned to face them, my back against the cold brick wall, playing the terrified victim. One of them sneered, his voice dripping with lust. Well, aren't we lucky tonight? That face and body. This is going to be good. The other one reached for me eagerly. You're trembling already, huh? Just wait. Soon you'll be begging for more. I laughed coldly inside. This was so clearly Leo's tactic. A classic, pathetic move. Let someone else violate me, then he would swoop in, acting the hero, saving me. He'd tell me it didn't matter, that he didn't blame me for what happened, and then magnanimously offer to take me back anyway. He thought it would shatter my newfound independence, make me reliant on him again. It was beyond disgusting. Right on cue, a loud roar echoed through the alley. Let her go. It was Leo's voice. He strode forward, a righteous savior emerging from the darkness, his expression a perfect blend of anger and concern. Maya, don't be afraid, he said, his voice projecting confidence. I'm here. I won't let them hurt you. The performance was so overdone it was laughable. Did he really think this pathetic script could fool me? He looked at the two thugs. Get out of here before I call the police. The men, as per their instructions, hesitated, giving him just enough time to play the hero. I straightened up. All traces of fear left my body. I looked directly at Leo, my voice flat with revulsion. Leo, I said. You disgust me. His heroic facade faltered for a second, confusion clouding his features. Without another word of explanation, I acted. I pulled a small canister from my bag. Not just pepper spray but a high-potency formula used by security professionals. I blasted it directly into the faces of the two thugs. They howled, clawing at their eyes. Then I turned to Leo. He was staring, stunned. Maya, what are you? I didn't let him finish. I gave him a particularly generous dose, aiming straight for his eyes. He screamed, a raw sound of shock and pain, stumbling backward. While they were all blinded and disoriented, I took out my second item. A compact high-voltage stun baton. I jabbed it into the first thug's side. He convulsed and dropped to the ground. I did the same to the second. Then I stood over Leo, who was on his knees, rubbing frantically at his eyes. You think I planned this? He choked out, his voice strangled. I kicked him hard in the ribs. If you're so innocent, I snarled, swear on Isabella's life that this wasn't your doing. He called after me, his voice breaking. Maya, I love you. You can't leave me. I kicked him again, this time in the leg. If you're sick, go get help. Don't lose your mind in front of me. I left them there in the alley, three writhing, pathetic figures in the dark. My heart was pounding, but not with fear. With triumph. Because I refused to let the incident go. And because I'd quietly pressured and coaxed those two thugs behind the scenes with promises of lesser sentences and financial incentives, they finally grew a conscience. They confessed everything to the police. They admitted that Leo Vance had been the one who hired them. I refused to settle. I insisted on pressing charges. Even when a haggard Robert and Eleanor Vance came to our house to beg, their pride completely shattered, I didn't waver. Compared to what my family had suffered in the last life, a criminal charge was a mere slap on the wrist. I had no sympathy left for any of them. What I didn't expect was the final, desperate act. Isabella showed up at my door. Judging by the pinched, reluctant look on her face, she'd been pushed into this by the Vances, a last-ditch effort to appeal to my non-existent softer side. The chapter was almost closed. The sting of the scorpion had been delivered. And it was fatal. Isabella stood on my doorstep, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. The first thing out of her mouth was a masterpiece of manipulation, delivered with a tremor that was probably only half-faked. Miss Sterling, what more do you want? She began, her voice a pitiful waver. You know how much Leo cares about you. He still has the engagement ring he meant to give you. He's been running himself ragged trying to raise money, all just to give you a better life and make up for what he did. Why do you insist on making things so hard for him? I almost laughed out loud. The sheer twisted logic was astounding. She was framing me as the unreasonable one, the obstacle to their happiness. He cares about me? I repeated, my tone flat. If he really cared, would he have run out of our wedding for you? You say he's working so hard to give me a better life? The only reason his family's company didn't collapse years ago is because my family helped prop them up. I took a step forward and she flinched. My business is doing just fine. I don't need anything from him. As for the ring you seem so obsessed with, I added, my lip curling, what kind of woman would still want anything from a man as cold and heartless as Leo? I waved a dismissive hand. Just go. You haven't done anything directly to hurt me and I don't want to target you. But if you keep showing up in front of me like this, don't blame me for what happens next. But instead of leaving, she surprised me. She stepped forward and grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Miss Sterling, I know this is all my fault. Everyone says I destroyed your relationship. If you're willing to forgive Leo and take him back, I'll leave. I'll go far, far away and I'll never come back. She sounded so resolute, so self-sacrificing. I started to wonder just how much pressure the Vances were putting on her. Their empire was crumbling and she was their last flimsy bargaining chip. When I didn't answer, her act escalated. She burst into tears, great, heaving sobs. Please, I'm begging you. I'll kneel if that's what it takes. Just as she began to sink to her knees in a dramatic, melodramatic gesture, Leo's car screeched to a halt at the curb. He must have been waiting nearby. He rushed out and pulled her up, holding her protectively. Isabella, no, he murmured, stroking her hair. He then looked at me, his eyes full of confusion and anger. Maya, you're being so cruel. You weren't like this before. You always listened to me. I let out a scornful laugh that echoed in the quiet street. You call this cruel? I used to be stupid, that's all. But I'm wide awake now. Leo stared at me, his gaze intense, searching my face as if seeing me for the first time. A strange, suspicious look dawned in his eyes. The pieces were finally starting to click into place for him. My coldness, my strategic dismantling of his life, my complete lack of the vulnerability he'd always taken for granted. Maya, he said, his voice low and hesitant. Did you come back too? My blood ran cold for a second, but I didn't let it show. Of course I couldn't admit it. Not yet. I looked him up and down, then gave him a look of pure, unadulterated contempt. If something's wrong with your brain, Leo, go get it treated. Don't think pretending to be insane will make me drop the charges. He stared at me in silence for a long, heavy moment, the truth hanging unspoken between us. Then, without another word, he turned and led a sobbing Isabella away, holding her as if she were the only solid thing left in his collapsing world. The Vances, in a final display of their dwindling influence, hired a top-tier lawyer for Leo. Since I hadn't been physically harmed, the court gave him a lighter sentence. He walked away with probation and a hefty fine, a slap on the wrist. But I didn't care. By that point, the Vance Group had run out of time and options. The constant bleed of capital, the lost partnerships, the scandal, it was a death by 1,000 cuts. They finally, officially, declared bankruptcy. I never resorted to truly underhanded, illegal tactics to destroy them. I left Robert and Eleanor with a shred of dignity, a small apartment and enough to live on. After all, the one who had wronged me was Leo, not his parents. I wanted him to see with his own eyes that in his previous life, his so-called success was only possible because of my family. Without us, he was nothing. After the bankruptcy, stripped of his wealth and status, Leo still reached out to me a few times. His calls were desperate, pathetic. Maya, he slurred once, sounding drunk. Can we stop fighting? I've always had you in my heart. Let's get married. I know you love me more than anyone. I swear I'll be good to you. I'll never leave you again. Another time, his voice was wistful, haunting. Maya, do you know? I had a dream. I dreamed we got married. We were so in love, so happy. Everyone envied us. He actually had the nerve to talk about happiness. The word was a spark thrown on a lifetime of kindling. Since the moment I was reborn, I had done everything in my power to restrain my rage, to be strategic, cold, and calculating. But now, hearing him romanticize the prison he had built for me, I couldn't hold it in any longer. Your so-called happiness, I hissed into the phone, my voice trembling with a decade of pent-up fury, involved sabotaging my brakes and letting me die in a crash. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. A brief, stunned silence. Then something shifted. I could feel it through the line. The last puzzle piece slid into place for him. He gave a low, bitter laugh. So, he said, his voice suddenly clear and devoid of pretense. You really were reborn too. He paused. Maya, do you hate me that much? The dam broke. Do you think a half-hearted sorry makes up for any of this? I screamed, all composure gone. Isabella died. And instead of blaming the people truly responsible, you turned around and blamed my entire family. You destroyed us, and you think I shouldn't hate you? I was shaking, tears of rage streaming down my face. I trusted you. I watched my family suffer. I remember my car rolling down the mountain, the pain of my body being crushed, the glass. That pain, I'll never forget it. Maybe it was the raw, unvarnished force of my outburst that finally made him falter. He was silent for a long time. I'm sorry, Maya, he whispered, and for the first time it sounded almost real. I thought. I cut him off coldly. You thought that killing me would prove your love for Isabella. You're nothing but a selfish coward. Even now, all you're mourning is how much I once gave you. It's never been about love, just about what you lost. I wiped my face, letting out a shuddering breath. The anger had passed, leaving behind a cold, empty calm. Get lost, Leo. I have nothing left to say to you. I paused, a final, cruel idea forming. But since we've known each other for so many years, I'll do you one final favor. I'll help you find Isabella. Think of it as a parting gift. He didn't say anything. Then suddenly I heard a sharp crack, the sound of him slapping himself hard across the face. I'm sorry, Maya, he repeated, his voice thick. If Isabella wants to leave, let her go. The one I love is you. I couldn't help but laugh again, the sound hollow. Even at rock bottom he was still trying to manipulate me. Leo, I said, my voice flat and final. Isabella is pregnant. The silence on the other end was absolute. I could practically hear the gears grinding in his head. First surprise, then a flicker of joy, then confusion, and finally dawning, ugly suspicion. Where is she? He demanded, his voice suddenly sharp and urgent. Maya, tell me where she is. I gave a small, cold smile he couldn't see. She didn't just leave you when times got tough, Leo. She's got a surprise waiting for you too. I hung up. The cracks in his perfect white moonlight were about to become a chasm. And I was going to enjoy watching him fall into it. 2 nights later, the heavens opened. Rain sheeted down, lashing against my windows, mimicking that fateful night from another life. The perfect backdrop for the final act. I sent a single anonymous text to Leo with an address. A cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. To get there, he'd have to drive the same winding, treacherous mountain road where my life had ended. The poetic justice was so sweet it was almost cloying. I waited, perched in the living room of a secluded mountain villa my family owned, overlooking that very road. The lights of the city were a distant, blurred tapestry through the rain-streaked glass. I had a direct line to the private investigator I had on Isabella. Once I knew Leo was enraged and on his way, I sent him the video. It was a short, damning clip. There was Isabella, not looking fragile or pitiful at all. She was curled up on a motel bed, laughing, nestled in the arms of a man I'd paid handsomely to play his part. They were looking at a baby name book on his phone, their heads close together. I called Leo. He picked up on the first ring, his breathing ragged. So Leo, I said, my voice calm over the sound of his car's engine and the pounding rain. Is the money Isabella used to rent that room and buy those clothes yours? That means you're basically the one supporting her and her new boy toy, right? I paused, letting the image sink in. Maybe you should go catch up with her and ask why she betrayed you. Ask her why she never loved you. I could hear his breakdown through the phone. It wasn't a sob but a raw, guttural sound of utter devastation. Isabella. Isabella, he chanted like a mantra of madness. He was doing great, of course. I'd promised her a one-way ticket out of the country and enough money to start over, far from the wreckage of the Van Cess, on the condition she play her part in this final scene. She had agreed without hesitation. Her love for Leo had always been conditional on his wealth and status. Now that it was gone, so was she. But I wasn't just after revenge. I wanted him utterly broken, his soul crushed before his body followed. A short while later my phone rang. It was Leo. His voice was strangely calm, detached. Maya, he said. The brakes. They're really not working. I know, I replied, my own voice equally calm. But if you don't get there within the hour, Isabella will be leaving the country. Her flight leaves at midnight. He laughed then, a dry, brittle sound like dead leaves rustling. Maya, how did we get here? We were so close when we were kids. I thought we'd grow up and stay together forever. I don't understand. Why did I lose to you? I looked down at the snaking ribbon of the mountain road, barely visible in the storm. Because you were too greedy, Leo. You wanted success, fame, and a beautiful woman on your arm. But I only wanted you dead. On the other end of the line, I heard him cry out, a sharp, agonized sound that was swallowed by the roar of the storm and the screech of tires. Maya, if I hadn't left you to chase Isabella that day, would you have forgiven me? No, I answered without a moment's hesitation. The truth was a clean, sharp blade. You spent a lifetime obsessed with her. Even if we went back to the beginning, you wouldn't give her up. And even if by some miracle you did, I still wouldn't forgive you. You are a murderer, Leo. In both lives. I could hear the strain in his voice, the struggle to control the car. The melatonin I'd had slipped into his drink earlier. A habit he'd developed in our last life to sleep. A habit I knew he still had, would be taking effect now. Drowsiness would be clouding his reflexes, weighing down his eyelids. Too bad for you, I added, my voice cold as the grave. She never loved you. She treated you like a fool. I took a final, cruel pleasure in my last words. Oh, and I forgot to tell you. Next, I'm going after your parents. But if you want me to spare them, well, that depends on your performance tonight. Better hurry. I'm watching you from the top of the mountain. Let's see just how deep your so-called love really runs. The phone line went silent for a moment, filled only with the sound of the storm and a desperate, labored breathing. I knew he wouldn't back out. His obsession was his compass, and it was pointing straight to hell. The last thing I heard from him was his voice, hoarse and weak, stripped of all pride and pretense. I'm sorry, Maya. I was wrong. For the sake of my parents, they really do like you. Please, don't make things hard for them. I replied with icy finality. We'll see how you perform. Then it came. A loud, metallic crash that was both familiar and foreign, followed by a profound, echoing silence. I looked down the mountain and saw the pinprick of his headlights swerve violently, then vanish, swallowed by the darkness. So Leo had at least a shred of self-awareness left. He knew he'd lost. He had no way out. How pathetic. In the end, he still couldn't catch up to the woman he'd spent his life chasing. His precious white moonlight was nothing but a reflection in a dirty puddle, and he had drowned trying to grasp it. The storm passed as all storms do. The sky gradually cleared, revealing a bruised, dawn-streaked canvas of purples and pinks. Standing on the balcony of the villa, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The air smelled of wet earth, pine, and something else, something I hadn't truly breathed in 2 lifetimes. Freedom. It was over. Everything Leo had taken from me in my last life. My family, my future, my very breath, I had taken back in this one. Justice, clarity, peace. They were mine again. He had lived an obsession, blinded by his own selfishness, thinking he could have it all. Glory, love, and someone to blame for his regrets. In the end, he lost everything. And I had watched it all fall, piece by piece, without lifting a single finger to stop it. Not because I was cruel, but because he had meticulously laid the path to his own destruction. I was merely the guide. The news of his death was reported as a tragic accident on a slick mountain road. A young man from a fallen family, his life cut short. There was a small, quiet funeral. I did not attend. My parents went for the sake of the decades they had known his parents. They reported that Robert Vance's mental state had declined rapidly, and Eleanor had spiraled into a catatonic silence, a hollowed-out shell of the society matron she once was. I didn't offer them a hand. I didn't send condolences or financial aid. After all, in my last life, when my father was dragged down and ruined by their son, when I died in a ditch, none of them had ever thought to save us. They had reaped the benefits of Leo's success. They could share the burden of his failure. The scales were balanced. As for Isabella, I didn't care where she ended up. The private investigator confirmed she boarded her flight, her belly slightly rounded, a ticket to a new life in her hand. That chapter was closed. She was a symptom of Leo's sickness, not the cause. The cause was his own rotten heart. My family was safe. My father's business, now unshackled from the Vances and bolstered by the alliance with Renshu Corporation, was thriving, expanding into territories he'd only ever dreamed of. My mother could finally sleep through the night without the gnawing fear of a phone call bringing catastrophic news. The shadows that had haunted our home were gone. Me. I was no longer the naive girl chasing after someone else's love, molding myself to fit a man's idea of perfection. The part of me that had loved Leo had been burned away in the crash, and the woman who emerged from the ashes was harder, sharper, and entirely her own. Renshu found me on the balcony later that morning. He didn't say anything about Leo. He simply leaned against the railing next to me, watching the sun burn away the last of the clouds. After a long, comfortable silence, he asked, "Do you regret any of it?" I thought about the question. I thought of the little girl who had followed Leo around, of the bride who had stood trembling at the altar, of the wife who had believed in a happily ever after. I thought of the betrayal, the cold plot for revenge, the terrifying fall down a mountain. I turned to him, the morning sun warm on my face. "No," I said, and the word was the truest I had ever spoken. "I don't regret a thing. Because the past burned me to ashes and from it I learned to rise. In this life I would love smarter if I chose to love at all. I would live freer, unbounded by anyone's expectations. I would protect what mattered most with a ferocity born of knowing what it meant to lose it." Renshu nodded, a quiet understanding passing between us. It wasn't a promise of a future together, but an acknowledgement of the people we were now, shaped by our pasts but not defined by them. I turned my back on the edge of the balcony, on the view of the mountain that had been both my end and my beginning. A new future awaited, uncharted and full of light. And this time, for the first time in both my lives, it was mine alone to choose. I walked towards it, not with the hesitant steps of a follower, but with the confident stride of a woman who had reclaimed her own soul. The air had never tasted so sweet. The end.